So there's an incident that's happened in relation to the Just Stop Oil protests. I'm reluctant to call them protests. I've been very clear what I think of those actions, and I 100% maintain everything I've said on that. I think it's counterproductive, reckless, dangerous, and illegal, not to mention obnoxious. I have no time for that sort of so-called protest. I think it's also undemocratic. So I haven't equivocated on what I think about that, and nothing I say in this video contradicts anything I've said about those sort of protests. But basically, during one of the latest incidents, the M25 incidents where the Just Stop Oil activists were climbing onto the framework, I guess it was, of the motorway. That is, I assume it's those signs. That's I'm not sure exactly, but it's the infrastructure of the motorway. Um, During one of those incidents, an LBC journalist was arrested by Hertfordshire Police, and she went through an experience that no journalist should have to put up with in a country that values freedom of the press. So I'm going to cite some of the background details of this because it's quite concerning. Um, the journalist works for LBC. Her name is. I'm just scrolling down here because I have a few different sites open. Um, Charlotte Lynch. She's been a reporter for 5 years. She was at Junction 21 of the M25 in Hertfordshire. This is near St Albans. So she'd been there for 45 minutes. Two male officers approached her. I wouldn't weigh too much on the gender thing because she did cite later on that it was a female officer who searched her. So I wouldn't weigh too much on that. But bear in mind, 8 journalists have already been arrested in these incidents, which is very concerning, um, and questioned why I was taking pictures and videos of the protest. Now, she immediately showed her press card, immediately, and that actually had the global logo on it, which was the parent company of LBC, showing that she's a journalist. But almost immediately, she had handcuffs put on her. She was asked, how did she get there? She said by car. And she has stressed that she was not with the protesters. So she wasn't on the motorway. She wasn't actually committing any criminal offence. She was at a section that wasn't, it's not prohibited. Um, so they immediately put handcuffs on her and arrested her on conspiracy to commit a public nuisance. Basically the same charge or a similar charge that the eco activists face. Although they face other things like trespassing and vandalism and all the rest of it. Anyway, because of the disruption that they caused, it took an hour to get to Stevenage police station. She spent 5 hours in a cell. She had her mugshot taken, basically treated like a criminal. Her rights were read out, and she was given access to a solicitor. But yeah, basically treated like a criminal. Now, she said that she didn't say anything because she didn't want to compromise. Well, anything you say may and will be used against you. I'm not sure if I would have responded that way. I think I would have been loudly protesting. But she was not interviewed in that 5 hours at all. That's concerning. Well, why didn't they interview her? Find out more information. Now, Hertfordshire Police have defended their actions. They've said it was a difficult situation. Their officers were under pressure, um, but they've ordered an investigation. Well, this is kind of, to me, it's an excuse. It's an excuse because how hard is it to tell the difference from a journalist doing her job versus activists who are clearly engaged in the stunts? I mean, Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil and Coal, they have those orange jackets on. They're pretty distinctive. Okay, and they almost immediately, as soon as they're at the site, they do what they do. They glue their hands to the road, they get up on the framework. Journalists don't do that. Okay. I'm not saying that journalists never break the law. I am not saying that journalists never do reckless things. There have been a few examples in the past, for example, of journalists pretending to be someone else in order to get a scoop. So this is not a case of saying journalists are perfect and they never break the law. But it is concerning when a journalist is clearly showing her press pass and the police just lack the common sense to see that that is legitimate. We have freedom of the press in this country, and it's a disgrace. And Hertfordshire Police should apologise to her. I mean, that must have been quite a daunting experience, being held in a cell for 5 hours. You know, she was probably thinking, what the hell's going to happen? Um, I know for myself, I have a press pass. I'm a freelance journalist, at least I've trained as a freelance journalist. Now, if I was in this sort of situation, I wouldn't be able to say I work for LBC or I work for the Times or I work for the BBC because I'm a freelancer. So it's bad enough that you have mainstream journalists being arrested, but someone in my position, a freelancer, wouldn't even have that sort of protection. But I am a qualified journalist. I haven't started yet. Um, I haven't got into my work as a journalist yet, but I have qualified. I'm with the National Union of Journalists. I have a press pass. Um, and it's concerning. There just seems to be a common sense deficit with the police these days. And like Nick Ferrari, he interviewed her. Um, I don't like criticizing the police. They do a difficult job. They face very real dangers, but frankly, there is a hell of a lot of incompetence going on. There's no other way to put it. As he put it, it's criminally wrong. Um, so I think they owe her an apology. But apparently, there's been 8 such arrests. Rishi Sunak's office has said that he strongly supports freedom of the press. One of his ministers was asked on LBC about this. The Education Secretary, Carol, just getting the link up. Like I said, I have a few different sources open. Excuse me, Gillian Keegan said that absolutely shouldn't be happening for for a journalist doing a job. Um, I don't think it's enough to say it's a stressful situation, so that justifies us arresting a journalist. If a journalist is showing the press credentials, uh, you know, they asked her how did she know about the event. Well, Just Stop Oil apparently had put information about this the night before on their website. Now, Just Stop Oil doesn't correspond with the police, which is one of the many reasons I think they're a big problem. Um, but they do put information on their Facebook page about, supposedly to warn motorists, so how nice of them. But that's how she knew about this. That's how she knew to be there. The job of journalists is to do research to find out these things. And as she put it, it's not her job to do the police's job for them and tell them about this in advance. Um, but I just think it's concerning. But none of this, I see predictably people are saying, oh, well, this is what's happening with the public order bill. Nothing in the public order bill says anything about arresting journalists. So I don't think this is the government's fault. I think this is the police's fault. I think it's I think it's conflation and distortion to say, oh well, this is a result of the public order bill. And mark my words, you'll get left wing activists who are saying, well, look what's happening. Journalists are being arrested because of these totalitarian laws as they see it. But nothing in that bill says anything about arresting journalists. The bill is designed, I've looked at it, the bill is designed to tackle a particular form of protest that's causing mass disruption. It's not making protests illegal, and it doesn't stipulate anything against journalists. Now, again, I'm not saying the press is above criticism, and I'm not saying journalists never ever break the law. But in this case, she had her press credentials. She was clearly separate from the protest, so she wasn't wearing one of those orange suits that they wear. It's just a question of common sense. And the fact that they didn't interview her in 5 hours is a disgrace. It's good that they've opened an investigation, but would such an investigation have opened if the story wasn't covered? This is why freedom of the press is so, so important. Now, in terms of the press, I'm not uncritical of the way they have covered Just Stop Oil. I think, for example, they've had far too many interviews with Just Stop Oil activists and not enough interviews with the people that they're disrupting. So I'm not uncritical of LBC and their coverage of this. Um, One of my critiques is, like I say, they give too much airtime to these activists, and not enough airtime to the people they're disrupting. But as someone who's trained in journalism, I don't want to say as a journalist because I haven't formally started yet, but as someone who's trained in journalism, it does concern me. I mean, you hear of countries like Colombia, the Philippines, certainly Iraq, and other Middle Eastern countries where being a journalist is very difficult. Mexico, dozens of journalists have been killed. Um, but Britain, this should not be happening in this country. So I think there's frankly a lot of police incompetence out there. Hertfordshire Police need to explain this. And it's not good enough to say, oh, it was a stressful situation. They need to explain why they're ignoring a press pass. They need to explain that because this has serious implications. If journalists cannot do their job without being arrested, that's a serious problem for freedom of the press, holding power to account, and covering the news. Now, there is an argument that just stop oil should just be ignored, that they want the attention, that they crave the attention. I give some credence to that argument. I think, they sort of see it as all attention is good attention, even though they're widely unpopular and their tactics are utterly failing. They still see it as, all news is good news, whether it's bad or not. But I do feel strongly that the police just need to use common sense. I mean, if someone's showing a press pass, I suppose they might argue that eco activists could pretend to be a journalist, but they haven't done that so far. I mean, they've been pretty upfront about what they're doing. They haven't, pretended to be someone else. So if they say that's an issue, I think that sounds dubious because that hasn't happened so far. But what has happened so far is there's been 8 journalists arrested. Now there's been hundreds of eco activists arrested. Good. They should be arrested. They're breaking the law. They're endangering lives. They should be arrested. Journalists who are doing their job should not be. There's a difference, an obvious difference, and there's absolutely nothing contradictory in saying that.